I'm Kai, so it's nice to be back on here. It's been a while. And I'm doing some bird calls and bird sounds for us. So every time I come on, I try to do a theme of a color of a bird. So I do one that's a local bird that you should find here throughout the year. And then there's another one that I do that's more migratory that you'll find based on the season that we're in. So obviously we're in February now that it's the first, and I chose the color black. So some birds that we don't necessarily think about a lot. And well, obviously I have Renee's favorite, which is really cool. I'm interested to see what her favorite is too between the two birds. But also I chose this color black because it's now Black History Month. So I wanted to celebrate in that way. So anyway, let's dive into the bird calls. So the first one's going to be the local bird, and I'll show the habitat that you'll find it in. There we go. Get my birds flying around. So I'll show the habitat that you'll find it in, and I'll play the sound for you. So feel free to guess in the chat if you think you know what it is, or you can keep it in your brain and you can claim that you knew it all along. I'll choose to believe you. But yeah, we'll go ahead and dive in. So local. Okay, so like I said, this is typically the habitat that you would find this in, but it's a local bird and it's really common. So it could be in a lot of different habitats around here. But yeah, this is going to be the habitat. And I'll play it again for you one more time. All right, so if you got your guesses, get them in now. So it is the red-winged blackbird. So a very distinct call. It's like a okali or a conklali call. So like you can pick that up, and if it's calling, you'll pretty much be like, oh yeah, that's a red-winged blackbird. So yeah, let's learn some more about this cool bird. So within their life history and behavior, they're one of the most abundant birds in North America. Like I said, they have that really vibrant shoulder patch, that scarlet kind of yellow and red shoulder patch that the males will puff up depending on how confident they feel. So that's kind of cool and kind of fun to see that, see how confident they might feel. And obviously in breeding season, it might be a little bit more robust and apparent for us. So talking about the males specifically, they're highly polygynous. They have up to 15 mates and very territorial. Ironically enough, with them being highly polygynous and very territorial, some of the offsprings in a territory aren't necessarily sired by the terrestrial male. So some other males are coming in and producing offspring in that territory, which is really interesting. So with them being so territorial, they often go after crows and hawks to defend themselves, but even horses and sometimes even people. So watch out. But typically in an urban setting, you won't necessarily get them going after people. They're used to people. But this isn't just exclusive to males too at times. So females can be awfully territorial as well. And I'll show a picture of a female because they look a little bit different. So this is going to be a female red-winged blackbird. So as you can see, they're not necessarily black. They kind of have that white streak on their chest and on their face, and they're more dark brown. They still kind of have that red patch on their shoulder, but it's much more subdued. And in some females, you might not see the red patch at all. They could just look like another sparrow. So it's kind of hard to identify the females too, which you might not think that you have seen a red-winged blackbird before, but like I said, they're pretty common. So you may have just seen it in the distance and may not have thought anything of it. They're not a very like exciting bird, depending on who you ask and in comparison to others, but I would beg to differ, especially with that red patch. So going forward, despite being so territorial, these red-winged blackbirds, they nest in loose groups because the territory that they use, and I'll talk more about the habitat that they like, are very scarce. They like more of a marshy habitat, so that's kind of scarce throughout the US. And in the fall and winter, you can see the flocks with many other blackbirds and grackles and cowbirds and starlings. So they're all mixing together and flying around. And they can be a flock up to thousands or millions even. So that's quite interesting. So moving forward into their diet, they eat mostly insects in the summer and then more seeds in the winter. So majority of the annual diet is going to be 3/4 seeds, but they do eat some berries and other fruits as well. In terms of their habitat and location, like I said, they're pretty much found throughout North America and the US specifically. Um, but where there's standing water and vegetation, that's primarily where you're likely going to find them. They're pretty common there from coast to coast. Breeding season, they like wet places like freshwater marshes, wetland areas, and stream bed and lakeside areas, waterways within wooded areas. But you can also find them breeding in drier places like sedge meadows and alfalfa fields and things like that. In the fall and the winter, though, they tend to congregate in the agricultural fields, feedlots, pastures, and grasslands. Easier to find their food that they would eat in those areas. So diving into the conservation and threats for this species, they are one of the most abundant birds, like I said, but they are still suffering from a bit of decline. So about 0.2% decline per year between 1966 to 2019. So that results in a cumulative estimated decline of about 28%. But they're still a species of low conservation concern. Like I said, really abundant. So urbanization is taking a lot of their habitat, which plays into the conservation. Also, spring heat waves threaten their young. So that's kind of what the threats that we see for their conservation. And then some fun facts for this bird. They're a sign of transformation and change. They also represent the power of love and compassion, which is fitting for February and Valentine's Day. And they're a symbol for spiritual growth, inner strength, courage, determination, and self-awareness. So I guess with such a common bird, a lot of people have assigned many symbols and signs to this bird. So they're all positive, which is good. They're not like an omen bird. So if you see these, you should rejoice because it's bringing good things. So now we'll dive into our migratory bird and look at the habitat and listen to what they are. All right. Maybe if this one wants to cooperate. There we go. All right, so for this one, it's kind of that ringing metallic trill that's all on the same pitch, and it's like a car alarm, people will say. Again, if you think you know it, feel free to put it out there, and I'll play it again for you one more time. All right, so last second, get them in, and I will reveal it is the dark-eyed junco. So there are some cute little birds. I'll play the sound for you all again. Again, it's that ringing metallic trill all on the same pitch for the most part, and then it's like a car alarm. All right, so let's learn some more about this cute little bird. So the dark-eyed junco is one of the most common and abundant forest birds in North America. They can be found throughout the continent, from Alaska to Mexico and from California to New York. So pretty much all over. And it's quite interesting too. So east of the Plains states, in the Plains area, the juncos kind of look like this picture. So I wanted to show a representation of what you would find here in Kentucky. So they would kind of look like this, that black gray top, and then that white bottom for the most part. And then the black and gray can vary on how much it covers the body too. But in the west of the plains, you find a different and more variety of color patterns. You have like a reddish brown on the back or on the underbelly, or some pink on the sides and some yellow. So it's kind of cool to see the variation in their color and their coloration based on where they are regionally. So when they're foraging, they typically hop on the ground like this one is. They scratch at leaf litter and flit very low in the underbrush. Sometimes they'll fly up and catch insects from the ground. The males will court the females. They'll fan or flick their tails and their wings. They'll hop around and up and down. They'll pick up pieces of nest material and rub them around and try to show off for the females. The females typically prefer males that show more white in the tail too. So it's kind of that selection pressure in that aspect. Juncos will typically have like a hierarchy or a pecking order, pun intended, based on arrival. So those that migrate to an area first will typically have higher ranking in the hierarchy than others. So that's kind of interesting, their hierarchy system that they might have. So diving into the diet, they're primarily seed eaters and makes up about 75% of their yearly diet. At feeders, if you're trying to attract these cute little birds, so if this one is Renee's favorite, tip, they do prefer millet and sunflower seeds. So if you want to track them, you can find them there. But they will typically eat under the bird feeder, not necessarily on the bird feeder. So during breeding season, they also eat insects, and they actually feed their young mostly insects. And they eat some berries too. So their habitat, they're mostly found in coniferous forests, but they can also be found in deciduous forests during the winter and on migration. They use a wider variety of habitats. They're less picky with their habitats. Open woodlands, fields, roadsides, parks, gardens, pretty much all over throughout the city and things like that in their migration. Like I said, less picky. And I actually saw a dark-eyed junco for the first time on campus, right close to our building at Forestry. So that's part of why I chose this bird. So then diving into their migration, they winter down in the lower 48 for the most part, and then even down in Mexico. So you will find them here in Kentucky around this time in the winter time. So they move down around September to December, and they winter here, and they move back up or west in around March to May. So that's when they'll move out. But in Appalachia, so we can see this little streak right here in Appalachia. They actually move just to higher elevations. They're a colder climate bird, so they'll just move to higher elevations as opposed to moving north or west. And then the different forms can actually meet up in the summer out west or up north. So like the different coloration forms, they'll actually meet up. So that's kind of cool. And interestingly enough, all the birds that I've talked about before, they typically migrate south from here, but this bird will migrate north or west. So it's kind of different looking at the migration of this bird. So diving into the conservation and threats, populations have declined about 0.7% per year from 1966 to 2019. It's about a 31% decline total. Estimated global breeding population is about 220 million. Low conservation concern, again, they're really abundant throughout North America. However, wildfires and spring heat waves are going to be their biggest threats. So lastly, with fun facts, I feel like I shared a bunch of little fun facts about this bird, but lastly, they're known as snowbirds. So they're commonly seen in snow throughout the lower 48 for the most part, especially in this region. And they're thought to bring the snowy weather with them. But it's really just because they tend to reappear in the winter time because they migrate here during those times. But yeah, so that is everything about the red-winged blackbird and the dark-eyed junco. So thank you, and I will see you next time.